Welcome back everyone to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host. I'm also a tutor at the London School of Astrology. I used to write horoscopes for Elle magazine and a number of other publications, and I'm the founder of stelliumastrology.com. And today we are continuing with our series on the aspects. We previously spoke about the conjunction, which is considered a neutral aspect, and we've also discussed the opposition and the square, which are both considered hard aspects. And now we're going on to softer aspects. And today the topic of discussion is the trine. But before we continue with that, I just wanted to give a shout out to a lovely person in my life called Claudia. And she has the Instagram page Aurora Astrologia, and she's based in Barcelona in Spain. And Claudia is a mentee of mine who posted up a really gorgeous picture of a tattoo she's just got. It looks very well healed, so it may not have been immediately after she got it done, but she's got her constellation tattooed on her wrist. And she's also got her ruling planets as well, so it's a really gorgeous little tattoo. And she said that, it was to symbolize her spiritual healing journey. And she said, I owe great gratitude to my spiritual team that always encourages me to study and further develop this passion and skill, and of course the incredible astrology authors and teachers that truly blew my mind away with such precious and self-empowering information. Writers like Stephen Arroyo, Howard Susportus, Frank Clifford, Sue Tompkins, Stephanie James, and many others were a torch of light for my self-discovery journey. And that, to me, was so wonderful to get that kind of feedback, that I was part of her journey, and she felt that, to give me a little shout out. So her Instagram page, I think I've just closed down my Instagram app. I will have to put a link to her Instagram page so you can check it out. But she's just starting out, and she's seeing clients, and she contacts me every now and again and sends me pictures of their charts, and we chat about it, because I guess when you mentee somebody, it never stops. I think that the conversation never stops, and it's a really rewarding relationship. So any of my students that get in touch with me, any of my mentees that get in touch with me, I always enjoy stopping and having a chat with them about charts and astrology and anything current, because it's a two-way street. We're both getting something out of it. I enjoy it too. So Claudia, thank you so much for your lovely shout out, and it's great to be part of your journey. It's great that you are part of my journey, and I've got a lot of love for you. The other thing I wanted to say was that I have now relaunched the podcast, the Stellium Astrology podcast, on YouTube. So the first episode is out, and it's going to be one episode a week going out onto YouTube, basically just relaunching this podcast onto YouTube. So it's stuff that you've probably heard before, and that's fine, but what I am doing is a little competition for anybody who wants to just take part, basically. So the launch date was the 15th of June. Gosh, I keep on thinking, I can't believe how hot it is at the moment. For this time of year it's crazy, and then I'm like, hang on, it's June. No, it's summer now. we're kind of like at summer. So yes, I've got my relaunch date. So I've got the 15th of June 2021, and I decided on 2:35 p.m. And the reason I chose that time is because it just puts all of the planets that day in a really nice position, and it feeds into my natal chart really nicely as well. And I've elected on that day, even though Mercury is retrograde and the Sun is in Gemini, which is Mercury ruled, which you would normally not elect a chart for a time when Mercury is retrograde. You'd avoid it, unless of course it is a relaunch or something you're going back over and doing again. So this is actually an okay time to elect. when Mercury is retrograde. And Mercury that day happens to be on my ascendant, going backwards. And Mercury also happens to be feeding into the ascendant of the day, of that moment, by trine. So the rising sign for the relaunch is 11 degrees and 54 minutes of Libra. And that is a really nice little communication between Mercury and the ascendant, which, considering this is a project about talking and it's a broadcasting project, and Mercury being in the 9th house of broadcasting, feeding in by trine to that ascendant, it's just a nice little aspect. And like I said, we're going to be discussing trines today, so you'll understand why I chose that in a little while. But there's quite a few trines in this chart. So Saturn is also trine the ascendant. So I've got in the 9th house Mercury and the Sun in the house of broadcasting, feeding into the ascendant, and then I've got Saturn, which is trine the ascendant, in the 5th house of hobbies and doing things because you're passionate about them, and enjoyment as well. And that happens to also be feeding back into Mercury by trine. So I've got what you would consider to be a grand trine in air. And air, as we all know, if you've listened to the air episode, is all about flapping your gums, sharing ideas, and, you know, just being generally a chatty Cathy, and sharing ideas, concepts, and relating with others. And this is so much more than I imagined it would be when I started out, actually. So this project has turned into a real collaborative project with my listeners, and I really appreciate everybody who submitted their charts. So if you'd like to enter the prize draw, what I've decided is I'm going to do I'm going to give away a Honeycomb Collective diary, which is a personal astrological almanac. I've put a link in the description for the episode, and I've decided that I probably would like to announce the winner on the birthday episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. So you've got up until, let's have a look, when is the episode beforehand? It may be before, it may be after, but I'm doing a birthday episode, which I think comes out on the 27th of July. Yes, the 27th of July. So you've got a little while yet to enter. And there's also another prize, which is a reading with me, though that reading will have to be booked at a time when I can, because a lot of you, as you are aware, I am closing down, or have closed down now, my booking calendar for a little while, just because I have impending motherhood to deal with. So it will be, the reading will have to be booked at a time that will actually work when the dust has settled, basically. But that means there's 2 prizes to be had, and all you have to do to claim these prizes, if you want to enter, is to go onto my YouTube page, which if you type in Stellium Astrology on YouTube, I should appear, but I'm probably not right at the top because I haven't got any videos on there at the moment. I've made all my videos private that I did previously that were really old. But yeah, basically all you need to do is go onto YouTube and just subscribe to my channel and hit the bell if you can as well. And, you know, you'll just get a notification when my podcast episodes come out, or when I put any other videos up for that matter. And that's all you have to do. And if you're a patron of the Stellium Astrology podcast, then you automatically get an additional entry as well. So I have seen the numbers creeping up. I don't have a huge amount of followers on my channel at the moment. I think the last time I checked there were about 50. But the odds are still really good. I think those are really good odds if you were to enter. And particularly if you were a patron, that's also really good odds to get 2 entries as well. So good luck, everybody. I'm closing that, so I guess I'll kind of close that entry really for the 27th of July. I guess that's when I'll kind of be announcing the winner. So, or maybe I'll do it on the actual birthday. I'll actually do an actual proper podcast episode that just announced the winner. Maybe I'll do that. But either way, I'll try and contact you. If you've got a private YouTube channel, please can you screenshot that you've subscribed, and then message me, either send it to me on Instagram or email me, stephanie@stelliumastrology.com, just because some people have followed me, but it shows up that it's just blank. So it would be really good if you've got a private YouTube channel to also let me know that you've subscribed. You can let me know that you've subscribed anyway if you want to. You can just send me a little message and tell me that you have. So I'm excited because it's lovely that people are listening and people are really getting involved. As mentioned, as part of this episode, we are talking about the trine, which is considered one of the major aspects. And the trine is the division of the circle by 3. So it's when you have two planets that are 120 degrees apart. Now, when I was talking about electing a time for my podcast, I picked a trine for Mercury to be communicating to my ascendant by trine, because it's a nice aspect that is in good, easy communication. Now, if you can cast your mind back to when we talked about the elements, that is also, each element is the division of the circle by 3. So if you were to draw an equilateral triangle over the wheel of the horoscope and place it on top of the ascendant, and say the ascendant is Aries, then the other points of the triangle would be on Sagittarius and Leo. And you can do that on each of the signs, and each of the elements will be in communication with each other. And that's exactly the same principle here with planets that are trine. It means that they are sitting in signs which are in communication, ease of communication with each other, if the planets are at the exact degree. So you could say that you have, like my elected chart for the podcast, I have Mercury at 58 degrees of Gemini, and the ascendant is 11 degrees and 54 minutes of Libra. Now that means that even though they're not exact, so Mercury's at 17 and the ascendant's at 11, they're still in that trine aspect. They're still in that communication, because generally with trine, it depends on which rules you go by. I think Sue Tompkins in her book, she says that the trine is more of a, I think 6 degrees of orb, I think she goes with. Let's have a little look and see what she says here. She hasn't specified it in this one, it's in the other book. But I think she generally goes with a 6 degree orb. I tend to go with an 8 degree orb. I think for me it's like just the ease of memory, and for everybody it's different. Now, I only have one trine in my natal chart as well, by the way. I think I have a Mars Pluto trine. So it's funny because my chart is so clustered and one-sided. I just have a lot of squares and sextiles. I don't have any oppositions, and I've got one trine, and it's the leading planet, the planet that is the one that's kind of leading the way. Trine, the one that's trailing behind, and all the other planets are kind of caught up in a little cluster in between the leading and trailing planet, which happen to be a trine apart. So it's quite an interesting, I suppose my chart looks a little bit clustered and a little bit odd. I do share some of my own chart information with my patrons. I've got a few videos specifically for my patrons, which do go into my own astrology, if you happen to be curious to see my chart. And who knows, maybe one day I'll be brave enough to reveal it to the world. But yeah, so with the planets being 120 degrees apart, and with that kind of that trine aspect that I'm describing to you, which by the way can be out of sign as well. So if you think about, say you've got let's have a quick look, say you've got Mercury at 29 of Gemini, then you could have another planet, so say Jupiter, you could have that at the final degrees of, let's see, what have we got, so 29 of Gemini going, yeah, so you could have Mercury at 29 Gemini and Jupiter at 1 degree of Pisces, and they would still be in trine with each other, even though they're out of sign, because they are still within an orb of each other. So it still is an ease of communication. It just means that they are out of each other's element. So like I was saying last week with the squares, you've got each planet that's involved in the square will be able to understand each other in the sense of the mode that they fall into. And squares do tend to be associated with challenge, and modes generally describe how we deal with conflict. And with the elements and with the trine, usually they are in the same element, and that is a kind of ease of like the motivation is eased, like they're not particularly caught up with conflict between two energies trying to communicate with each other. But even if they're out of sign, it doesn't weaken the power of the trine. It doesn't weaken the power of the trine at all. I think it just adds an extra layer of complexity. But the trine is not a very conscious aspect, not in the same way the square is, or the opposition. I mean, the opposition is almost a subconscious aspect because it's easy to project onto other people. So you can disassociate yourself from certain qualities thinking it's other people. So you can almost say that it's a little less of a hard aspect, but you still have to learn how to deal with other people and to relate, and that develops your relational skills. However, with the trine, it's so easy and flowing, and it's almost like a natural gift or natural aptitude, that it becomes a second nature to you. So you aren't as aware. So I did a little talk for the Astrological Lodge in London quite a long time ago now, I think back in 2017, and I talked about the aspects, and for the trine, I talked about the trine almost like being a comfort zone, and just being is quite passive. Generally, it can be, if you can think of the square as being stubborn and standing up for itself, you can say that the trine is almost a bit of a pushover. But there is this ease with the trine, and it's considered to be quite lucky or kind of a natural gift. So it could be where we have natural abilities to do things. So just for example, with my Mars and Pluto trine that I have, which I never really ever gave too much thought to it. I have a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which happened to sit on the 5th house cusp of creativity and hobbies, which obviously I'm somebody who has a lot of hobbies, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing this podcast and I wouldn't have got so into astrology in the first place. But I'm also somebody who plays a lot of musical instruments and can sing and can write. Now, I'm not particularly good at reading music, but I have an ability to just pick up an instrument and generally just play it. I can work stuff out, very basic stuff, very easily, and I can sit down. If you give me a day of playing around with something, I can work something out that's quite complex on pretty much any instrument that you give me. And I never really thought that was a gift. I just thought, oh, it's just something I can do, and never really bothered to push myself. And that's the difference between a square and a trine, because, you know, the trine, this kind of gift that I've got, which develops my hobbies and makes me able to sort of have, I think more than anything with a Mars-Pluto trine, there's a sense of resilience and almost like a bloody-mindedness about just obsessing over what you want to do. And I have to say, teaching myself guitar from a book when I was younger, much younger, I think I was probably 13 when I started learning guitar. I got a book from the library. I'd said to my mum, I really want an electric guitar for Christmas. And she went, well, if you can play a song on the guitar, then we'll get you one. And it was really funny because I just went to the library, bought myself a book, and that was it. I sat down and I learnt the chords. I taught myself I listened to music, and I picked up on when to change chords and rhythms, and completely and utterly taught myself how to play guitar by myself, with pre-YouTube days, pre any of these days where you could literally watch a tutorial and do it. I never had any of that. And I'm quite good. I'm better than a lot of people I know. Gosh, that makes me sound very big-headed, but no, I know a lot of musicians who are very, very good. And they're always very surprised when I play guitar for them, because they just think, wow, oh gosh, I didn't even know she played, because I just keep it to myself. It's not something that I pursue, but I am very good at guitar, and a lot better than some of the musicians that I know who are consider themselves to play, like maybe they're more singers or whatever, but there are often people are quite surprised when they hear me play any instruments really. And that's what I kind of mean about it. It's that I can do it. It comes naturally to me, but I just don't push myself to be better. I might sit down and have a couple of weeks where I just want to learn a few new songs, but then I put the guitar away and then I get on with things and do other stuff. Whereas with Mercury, I've got that square between Mercury and Saturn. I'm constantly pushing myself to write. I'm constantly pushing myself to improve my communication skills. I'm always thinking of ideas to come up for the podcast. It's like that it just doesn't go away, that nagging sensation of having to keep pushing forward with my writing, with my communicating, with my podcast, with astrology. That side of things is very much the squeaky wheel which needs oiling, whereas the trine is the wheel that somehow it just got put on properly when the vehicle was made, and it's not squeaking, it's just trundling along and going unnoticed almost. It's a little bit like if you've got children and you've got one child who's really naughty all the time and you've got one that's just really placid and really well behaved, you end up giving the child who's really naughty a lot more attention because they are constantly playing up. And it's possible that maybe they're playing up because they know they're going to get the attention, whereas the child who's placid and just gets on with it kind of just gets left to their own devices. And it's not a kind of a dig at anybody who's got two children who's not able to divide their attention equally, but I think that's the kind of challenge it represents. As well, I think I gave an example in the blog post that I wrote for the squares about the two students, and one student who is naturally academic, naturally good at just grasping the concepts in the classroom and just getting on with the work. And then you've got the other child who really struggles and really has to push themselves to do better. So you could say that the one that has the natural aptitude is the trine, and the one who doesn't and finds it more difficult is the square. And the one we'll say the one that's the square may have to work harder, study more, maybe even get an additional tutor to help them outside of school. And they really, really push themselves, and they exceed the projected grade that they have been projected by their teachers, that they kind of said, oh, you're not, you're going to get this grade, and kind of mark them down even prior to them sitting the exam. Whereas the one who has the trine kind of thinks, well, I know how to do this, it's easy, I don't really have to study. And they may just be happy getting a mediocre mark because they didn't actually put much effort in, because it comes so naturally. Or they may actually ace the exam, but not even think, oh, well, I'm going to push myself to go further, and I'm going to push myself to go to do more. I just had another flashback to school. My art teacher, I remember, this is my bloody mindedness, when we were picking subjects in year 9, and she said, Stephanie, you're definitely doing art. And because I guess I was quite good at that as well. And she said, you're definitely doing art. And I thought, oh, just because she said that, I'm not going to do it. So I didn't bother. And it's a shame, because it was something that did come naturally to me. It would have been a really easy exam to pass. I would have, really enjoyed doing it. But I just decided not to take it because she told me I'm definitely doing it. And my bloody mindedness, there you go, kicks in and goes, well, I'm not doing what you tell me to do. But there you go. I think that was my trine in action again. It was just very, it was, it's annoying because I could have very easily tapped in and used that trine, and instead I decided not to, and I just made my life a bit more difficult for myself. But I guess that somebody with a lot of squares in the chart is always going to probably choose a slightly harder route, as well as being a Capricorn who does tend to take the slower route up the mountain. So you may identify with the ease of passage that you get with a trine. I just actually happened to be thinking about, I was talking about Claudia at the beginning of the episode, and I know that Claudia has a grand trine in her chart, which is involves some, I think it involves Saturn. I can't remember exactly what she's got in her chart now, but I know it involves Saturn. It might involve her sun as well. and she also has another planet in another sign. I don't know if it's Neptune. I can't remember which planets they are, but whenever we talk, she always refers to it and really considers it her lucky gift, because she's got one planet in each of the elements that's shared by each of these planets, and they're all in aspect to each other, and that means that they're all in communication and they're all helping each other along. And she feels that it's a real blessing in her life, and she's got this real gift. She's very talented. She's a professional musician. She's a professional astrologer, and she's just very artistic and very spiritual, and a really wonderful spiritual soul to be around. So it's really interesting that she's got this grand trine, and she really recognises it as a gift. And, you know, she does have this kind of natural ability to pursue some of her creative endeavours, but she has the ability, with Saturn as part of her grand trine, to ground it as well and actually get tangible results too. So it's very interesting when you look at that. And there's another girl that I know who works in fashion. She works as a personal shopper and product buyer at Selfridges in London. And she also has a grand trine, which she puts her luck down to for doing what she absolutely loves doing. She just feels like it's a gift that she's able to do what she really loves and be, you know, really enjoy life and enjoy her job. And, you know, there's some of us that just go to work and it just feels like an absolute grind. And then there's other people who just seem to just fall on their feet. And the trine does seem to be a bit of a lucky aspect, particularly if you have a grand trine. You can have grand water trine, you can have a grand fire trine, grand air trine, or a grand earth trine. So you can, you know, think about the different ways that you could have planets in trines in different elements, which is why it's important, if you haven't already, to go back and listen to the elements and the modes, those episodes, because this is where, I know that I said it at the time, and maybe some people haven't listened to these episodes because they want to skip ahead and think it's boring, but this is where we really understand the root of how the signs work, you know, and how each sign is different, because each embodies one of the elements and one of the modes, and there's no two signs that are the same. You might have you know, 3 signs of the same element, and you might have 4 signs of the same mode, but you won't have 4 signs of the same element of mode. You know, it's just they're all a slightly different combination, and they all work in their own different way. So it's definitely worth checking back over that and just kind of immersing yourself in that kind of experience to kind of understand it. So there's so much I could say. I mean, I have got Sue Tompkins' Aspects in Astrology book in front of me, and just this little bit that my eye is drawn to says, try and describe motivation, perhaps because we seem to be motivated towards not only pursuing pleasure, ease and enjoyment, but also a quality of being rather than doing. I like that. It's true. And, you know, like I said, with the elements and with the modes is about how we deal with conflict, and the elements are how we deal, well, kind of what motivates us, how we're motivated to go about things. So, you know, just think about in your chart if you've got anything trine. Now, you don't have to have trines by you know, it doesn't have to just be planets. Like I said, with the elected chart for the podcast, Mercury's trine the ascendant, you can have the planets trine your angles as well. You could have, for example, you could have Jupiter trine your descendant, and you could just meet very Sagittarian types, very lucky people. You know, the partners that you meet could take you on holidays, or, you know, expand your existence through knowledge and cultural stories and new experiences. There could just be a sense of fate or luck about meeting people. You know, you may just always have the fortune to find somebody that you like, you're interested in, whereas some people who don't have, you know, like maybe someone had Saturn square the descendant, for example, may, you know, attract very serious older partners, but maybe often choose to be alone rather than have a partner because they just, they don't have time for relationship nonsense, just as an example. So yeah, I think that definitely check out the Sue Tompkins book because, she's got some great... This one is Aspects in Astrology, but like I said, there is also the book, which is the Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook, and there were other books as well that I definitely need to include. I think one of them is Aspects by Robert Pelletier, and I think the Frank Clifford Get to the Heart of Your Chart also explores the aspect as well. So there's plenty of resources for you to draw on. And I thought I'd look at a listener chart today. What have I done with it? Oh, it's on my phone. The listener that I thought we could look at is also a podcaster himself. He got in touch with me ages ago, and I've sadly overlooked his chart because I'm a bad girl. And I'd always done this sort of a little bit ad hoc kind of, almost unplanned in a way, this podcast. And he said his name is Jeff, and he said, I found your podcast through an online search and I've been enjoying your interpretations and sense of humour a lot. So glad somebody gets it. I really am. He then said, I too host an astrology podcast, so it's always nice to meet another podcaster. I don't know which podcast he presents, so I will have to find out and get in touch with him. And so Jeff, if you are listening, let me know. He says he's fluent in astrospeak and he has clients. So that's what we know about him. So Jeff's chart, which I will include in the post for this episode, is he has Aquarius rising, 5 degrees Aquarius rising. He has moon at 154 Virgo, and he has sun at 2513 Aquarius. His sun and moon are in an opposition, slightly wide, but they are opposing. So there you go. There's immediately this full moon personality who is, I guess, reaching an audience. That sun in Aquarius, that is community focused. It's different. It likes to work with concepts and doing, new technology, old technology. Often they're either really ahead or behind the times. As this is a podcaster, I'd say he's pretty much got his finger on the pulse of what's current. That moon in Virgo, which falls in his 7th house, kind of reiterates that relationship, that the emphasis on relating with others, and kind of, it's with a moon in Virgo as well. This is somebody who is really good at making sense of things for other people, quite a discerning character, somebody who can take a vast subject like astrology and actually break it down into more manageable bite-sized chunks for people who are looking to learn or looking to just be part of the podcasting experience, a bit like you guys are here. I think I purposely chose a bit of Virgo for my first podcast launch chart because I wanted it to be a kind of breaking things down and making sense of the complexities. But what I liked about Jeff's chart is that he's got his moon in trine with Neptune. It's quite wide. He's got Neptune at 7 Capricorn, and like I said, his moon's at 1 Virgo. But as the moon is a fast moving planet, it means it was approaching a trine. So it hasn't quite met by trine yet, it's just approaching that. And with his moon in the 7th house, other person focused, and Neptune happens to be on the 12th house cusp. So if you remember me talking about the house cusps and how much of what we would kind of call them like a PowerPoint, it's kind of at that PowerPoint really, if you're using equal house, by the way, which I am. So I liked it because you could look at this in two ways. Jeff has a Venus and Neptune conjunction. Now, Venus and Neptune together are lovely romantic planets, and they're not really the most realistic and the most practical. Neptune likes to blur the boundaries of everything that it comes into contact with. Venus likes to is very charming and is, it looks like that vanity mirror, that symbol. There's almost a sense of needing to relate and to have an experience learning about themselves through their reflection in others. So this projected experience that I referred to earlier. So there you go, you've got this very romantic combination sitting in the 12th house, which is already quite an impractical area, quite a spiritual area, and also an area known as the house of self-undoing. And the other relationship between the moon and these two dreamy planets sitting in the 12th house is that the moon is in the sign of Virgo, which is a sign of servitude and wanting to help others, in the 7th house of relationships and other people. And then you've got this communication by ease in trine to Neptune sitting in the house of resignation. So we've got this kind of Virgo Pisces feeling about the moon and Neptune in trine. So there's a sense of almost compassion and selflessness and wanting to offer themselves to other people. And whenever the moon and Neptune are in communication, whether it's by square or trine or whatever conjunction, there is this real challenge to have personal boundaries. So it could be that, depending on whether Jeff owns his moon and kind of identifies with his own moon, or whether he is somebody who experiences his moon through his relationships, there is a sense that he needs to work on his boundaries, his emotional boundaries. And it could be that he feels a longing to help people above and beyond what he should be really doing. He does have his Neptune in Capricorn in conjunction with Venus. So there is this sense of boundaries about Capricorn. There is this sense that, Capricorn likes to have structure. It likes to be organised. It likes to assert its boundaries, and it likes to, it's quite cold and it can be quite isolating. But that, and Virgo isn't known really to really want to blur the boundaries and get involved with other people. But in the relationship house, in the 7th house, this is a really service-orientated moon. It's quite close to the 8th house cusp as well. So it may be the kind of service-orientated moon that actually wants to give more than just themselves and wants to financially help other people, quite the philanthropist perhaps even. So that moon is, as it moves up to about 3 degrees of Virgo, it's going to be trine Venus as well. So it's a very it's a lovely compassionate trine, but it can be a bit self-sacrificing. And like I said, Jeff, if you are the person who attracts that moon, it could be that you attract people who appear to be quite self-sacrificing but have a hidden agenda, which that 12th house Venus and Neptune might suggest that they don't always appear what they seem. Or it could be that you do identify with that moon and you do give too much, and you are extremely giving, compassionate, and just wanting to help other people, and to the detriment of yourself. But at the same time, as a podcaster, as somebody who is in communication, has a message they want to share, this is a great combination for reaching out to other people. The Neptune, Neptune is if you think of somebody pouring water into a receptacle that's got holes in, it leaks out everywhere. It's really hard to contain Neptune. So actually it's an interesting one because it spreads that message, and it reveals the structures, the cracks in the structures of Capricorn. So actually, this is a good way to spread a message as such. Venus, I know you talked about your nodes actually, and you asked about your nodes, but you do have your nodes in the houses of broadcasting and gathering information as well. So you've got your North Node in Aries and your South Node in Libra, and they're both in the 3rd and the 9th house. And the reason I'm looking at that, why I'm drawn to that, is the fact that Venus also rules your South Node. And your moon in Virgo happens to also be in trine to Mars in Aries, which is in that 3rd house of communication. So it looks like your journey in life is about gathering information. And the nodes never work separately. They are part of a team. And it's about balance, always trying to balance those those energies, because we are allowed to draw on our past experiences and our previous skill sets from our, you know, what we've already accrued in this life and what we have in our previous lives. But actually, you know, stepping into your North Node and, you know, studying courses and communicating messages and social interaction is important too, which I think is reflected through the idea of this podcast that you have. So the fact that the moon is trine that as well, and that you've got Mars trine Saturn and Uranus in your in fact it's exactly trine Uranus in your 11th house as well. This makes the community aspect and communicating that message and kind of being seen as somebody who is dares to do what they want to do and dares to speak their own mind and pursue their own vision of what they want to do, and through that vision and through that action that you take, drawing your community towards you. And you know, it's quite a sociable and fun aspect, I think, having that trine. But like I said with the trine, it's not like a burning, itching desire that squeakiest wheel gets oiled first thing. It's something that comes quite naturally, a sense of ease for you. So it may be that perhaps maybe, you know, doing this podcast, it feels like that's very much the mission for your sun and ascendant, to be reaching out to your community, reaching out to your people, and doing your Aquarian thing. And you know, Aquarius is very much, I think, quite a self-driven and happily independent sign. And it's, you know, it's. I think that with that Mars trine your Uranus, and that's quite exact as well, and your sun sits right in the middle of that as well. So, gosh, this is a really interesting chart. It's so interesting. I'm gonna have to post it up, because not only does Jeff have you know, he's got a grand trine aspect, he's got his moon, he's got Uranus, and he's got Mars all in trine together, and they're all out of sign. So you've got Mars in Aries and Uranus in Sag, which they're fire, and then you've got the moon in Virgo, so just moved out of Leo. So you know, there's that mutable earth aspect, which is quite a nice grounding force, I think, for that fire. You've also got the moon opposite the sun in Aquarius, and so that's got the opposition, and so that feeds into that grand trine, which actually makes a kite aspect. So, you know, this grand trine is really able to you know, plug in, bring those aspects of your chart together, the 11th, 3rd house and the 7th house, and so that's like relating to your community and drawing on your own resources and other people's resources to help people find their own place and their sense of individuality through community, but at the same time communicating a message. And, you know, the spotlight is on you still, because you are the one that's hosting this podcast, and you've got the sun in the 1st house, which is part of the opposition of the kite. We will talk about different aspect patterns later on in this podcast, but anybody who wants to look at this chart, I will be getting the chart up. I will be getting the blog post out, but it's a really cool one. I really like it, and there's lots of trines here. But yeah, I definitely think I'm going to have to do an additional show on the nodes, and might even get somebody in who's a real expert on it. I can talk around the nodes a bit, but I would love to get somebody to come in and actually do the subject justice in a way that I can't. So that's Jeff. Thank you for submitting your chart. I hope that was okay. You do need to get in touch with me and let me know, and I promise I'll get in touch with you and let you know that you've been on here. But I just can't get over, he's got midheaven at 25 Scorpio, he's got Uranus at 25 Sag, Sun at 25 Aquarius, and Mars at 25 Aries. So anytime there's a planet at 25 degrees, Jeff's chart lights up like a pinball machine. That's quite cool. So thank you, Jeff, for submitting your chart. Now, I did have lots of charts that have celebrity charts to look at that have loads of trines. I guess one that might be interesting to look at really is I'm going to go for Steven Spielberg, because he's got he's got his ascendant at 10 Cancer, his sun is at 26 Sagittarius, and he has got moon at 6 Scorpio. But he has got a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in trine to his Mercury. So Saturn's at 8 Leo and Mercury's at 7 Sagittarius. And he also has, it looks like connected to his nodes, he has Neptune, which Neptune is trine his north node in the 12th house. And, you know, Neptune is really associated with the glamorous Hollywood vibe. And it looks to me like he's somebody, I mean, obviously he's got other aspects to his chart, but he's somebody who has really been able to give voice, you know, Mercury in Sagittarius, in that broadcasting sign of Sagittarius, to lots of really interesting concepts and ideas. He's such an amazing storyteller. You know, the amount of films that he's produced that have been huge hits. I'm trying to look now. I've got some images. I think one is Catch Me If You Can. Is that a Steven Spielberg film? Gosh, E.T., Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan. Oh my goodness, Indiana Jones. Is Jaws one of them? Oh gosh, what was the one I was watching the other day? Close Encounters. I love that film. That's a Spielberg as well. He's just very good at what he does. And he had that film AI as well, with Jude Law and Haley Joel Osment. You know, he took over, I think, I can't remember who was making it originally. Was it a Kubrick film? And then Kubrick died, and so Steven Spielberg took over. And it definitely feels much more Spielberg than it does Kubrick. But yeah, Steven Spielberg, he's 18th of December 1946, born at 1816 Eastern Standard Time in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I've cast the chart as an equal house chart. He's also got, he's got Jupiter trine the midheaven, Jupiter and Venus trine the midheaven as well. Again, feels like a very saggy, storytelling, broadcasting orientated chart. And with that Neptune feeding into the nodes by the north node by trine and the south node by sextile, there's the opportunity for his message to be to pick up on really the zeitgeist, I think, and you know, then fed through the 12th house, which is that kind of seeping, leaking area where there are no boundaries. It's a nice way to communicate his ideas and tell his stories, to be picked up by the collective consciousness. He does seem to have his finger on that pulse. Anyway, there's plenty of charts we could have looked at, but I thought I'd just stick to that for now. And next week we'll be talking about the sextile, which is actually considered to be the last really of the major aspects. So not as obvious as a trine, but definitely an interesting one to pay attention to. Don't forget to go to YouTube and subscribe if you want to be entered in to win that Honeycomb Collective Diary or a reading with me. And if you'd like an additional entry, you can sign up to my Patreon page, which I'm always putting up videos and posts and whatnot. And yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode today. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll speak to you next time. Take care, guys. Bye.